Hello, I'm Byron Connolly, Head of Programs at ADAPT, and today I'm joined by Victor Dominello, the former New South Wales Minister for Digital Government. Victor spent 12 years in various roles at the Department of Premier and Cabinet. He worked to improve digital wallet capabilities with Service New South Wales and Services Australia, and got the digital Opal card for the New South Wales Transport Network moving in the right direction. Now, Victor left his post as Minister for Customer Service in March, and in May, he was appointed Director of the Trustworthy Digital Society Hub, which is a new initiative from UNSW and UTS in Sydney to lead research and insights into citizen-centred digital platforms. He's also taken a board seat at the Tech Council of Australia, replacing Wyatt Roy. Victor Dominello, welcome.
Thanks, Byron.
Glad to have you here, mate. Listen, firstly, how's life since you moved out of state politics? How are things for you?
Very hectic. There's a lot of opportunity out there to make a difference and hopefully continue having an impact. It's just weighing up which of those opportunities will have the highest impact. So I'm just going through that process now.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's plenty to talk about today. Firstly, the Tech Council of Australia has created a new working group designed to advocate for reform on both digital identity and credentials. Now, you yourself, you have a digital license and you haven't carried a wallet for 5 years now. Yet you say that the way that these digital licenses are at the moment, they reveal too much personal information and accrue de facto forms of ID. Tell us why you hold that opinion. What personal data does the digital license reveal that it perhaps shouldn't?
Oh, there's way too much personal information in a digital driver's license or its predecessor, the plastic card. Think about on a plastic card, you got your wet signature, you got your address, you got your date of birth. You've even got things such as whether you need glasses or not. It's just way too much personal information. For example, if I'm going into a nightclub and all I need to demonstrate is I'm above the age of 18, why do they need to know my exact date of birth? Is the bouncer giving me an astrology read? It's just too much information. And in an age where information is power, we've got to empower the individual with control over their personal information rather than empowering the state or anybody else with a bevy of information. So this is really ensuring that we strengthen democracies in an increasingly challenging global environment by empowering the individual.
Yeah, so it definitely risks breaching personal privacy in its current form.
Oh, without a doubt. And again, I gave you a very graphic example of why a bouncer doesn't need all this personal information. But even when you go to hire a car and you give them a copy of your passport, your driver's license, do they need all that information? Because quite frankly, all they need to know is that you're authorised to drive a car in New South Wales or whatever the state or territory may be. They don't need to have all that information. When you go to register your child for sport, do they really need a copy of the birth certificate, which contains all the personal information in relation to the parents? Like, come on. This is old world thinking that is not suitable for the 21st century.
Do you know how many people in New South Wales are currently using a digital licence? Has the uptake been what you expected up until now?
It's over 80% now, which is just extraordinary. When we started the journey, you always get your early adopters, and we got to about 20-25% pretty quickly. And then it was starting to plateau out a bit. But then we pivoted in the pandemic and used that platform basically to have the border passes, have the check-ins, have the Dine to Discover vouchers, have a whole lot of things that we then put on top of that service app. And we've seen that just grow exponentially, really, over a relatively short period of time to the point where it's now 80%, which is just extraordinary.
Yeah, it's a huge uptake. Now, Victor, you say that a fit-for-purpose digital ID would give more control to an individual around what information they share and for how long, which obviously enhances privacy. So what would a fit-for-purpose ID look like, and what moves will the Tech Council make to create one?
Well, it's not for the Tech Council to create one. The Tech Council is there as an advocacy body, and when the feds will release their draft bill, I think, in the next few months. There'll be a discussion around that. Tech Council will obviously have a role relation to making submissions on that draft bill. Then hopefully the bill gets into Parliament early to mid next year, with some products starting to come into the market around that trusted digital identity framework.
Yeah.
So that's, and again, it's got to be an ecosystem play. It's not just government issuing a credential, like an ID and then a verifiable credential. It's got to be an ecosystem. So it's a G to C, G to B, B to B, B to C. And that's where you'll get enormous uplift and productivity throughout the entire ecosystem.
And Victor, can you talk about how you're going to work with the tech sector to make this a reality? And secondly, how would the people of New South Wales be consulted during this process?
Well, there's already products in the market. Australia Post have got an identity product. There's already MyGov. New South Wales is going to put their hat in the ring. But a lot of it's disjointed. So, for example, a lot of the identity products are only identity products. Where the real magic occurs is where you marry up identity and the credentials, i.e. the who and the what. So, for example, in the New South Wales product that we were hopefully still going to roll out, that is a seamless display and really world leading, where on one app, it doesn't just show you who you are, it shows you what you can do. Whereas at the Feds, if you go to MyGov, that's an identity play. But then you have to go in and out of various products to show what. So, that I'm entitled to Centrelink. Then go back into identity. Then I've got to go into something to establish I'm entitled to something else. So that's a clunky experience, but hopefully, we can start sorting that out as a nation. In terms of consultation, the Feds will have to drive that. The Tech Council, for the Tech Council members, we're going to have some working groups there to understand what the tech community says, so that we can fairly represent them when we're making submissions to the federal government.
Yep, good. Now, for those of us that are old enough to remember the Australia card, which was something that obviously didn't come to fruition, how do we avoid what happened there? And in the face of, I guess, so many high-profile cyber breaches here in Australia, how can New South Wales citizens be sure their data will never be compromised or used for nefarious means?
Well, two questions there. The first is Australia card took place in an era before the internet. I.e., it's like having a discussion around Australia card is like you might as well be talking about the Industrial Revolution, hundreds of years ago. Right? It's the world has completely changed. We're now having low orbit satellites above us. The world has completely changed from the Australia card. If you get the data and digital architecture right, you actually enhance privacy settings. Like if I drop my plastic card, my credit card, my plastic driver's license, or even my paper passport, where are the security settings there? Whereas if I lose my phone, I can quickly, kill the locks in play and then upload all the fresh information on my new phone overnight, within minutes. And we saw that demonstration in relation to the Optus breach. If you had a digital driver's license and your driver's license was compromised, you would have a digital driver's license back on your phone within minutes. If you had a plastic license and that was compromised, in some states to this day, 9 months on, you still have a flag against that identity credential. So minutes versus months. So this, if there is an attack on a credential, whether it's a digital credential or a plastic credential, the issue is how quickly can governments get you back on your feet. Through a digital process, it is far, far faster and more efficient to get you back on your feet than traditional methods.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the other thing I wanted to cover was community trust. It's at an all-time low at the moment. What's your view? Should we start with a tech first, or a consultation communication campaign first, or should they be done sort of at the same time? How do you feel about that?
No, they should be done at the same time. Like, when I rolled out various products in New South Wales, you do it by pilot. You tell the community what you're doing. You're telling them why you're doing it, and
Yeah.
you got to your point, Byron, you got to build the trust. So
Yeah.
it's not mandated; it's all opt-in. And the best way for it to work is when you say it's opt-in, you start getting a tribe of people that use it and say, wow, this is a really good experience. This is great. They
Yeah.
become your best advocates. The
Yeah.
reason we got to 80% is not because it's a bad product. If it was a bad product, no amount of selling would be able to get you to 80%. We got to 80% because people said, wow, this is a pretty cool thing to have. It means I can leave my wallet at home. It's seamless. It's easy to use. The satisfaction scores are in the 90 percentiles. Once you do that, once you pilot it out, get it to a world-class experience, then that builds trust, because people are saying, government's not forcing this down my throat. I choose to use it because it's better for me.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Let's move on to the Trustworthy Digital Society Hub, which, as I said, is a collaboration between UNSW and UTS. And of course, the Hub wants to create a world where individuals and communities can benefit from digital technologies without sacrificing their privacy, security, or rights. Can you talk a little bit about the products and services you're going to be working on initially there and how they're going to help to improve privacy and security?
Yeah, there's a few things that we're playing around with at the moment. So the first is a Vanguard unit. And we've got a lot of emerging tech, for example, Gen AI. Adobe have reached out to me and said, look, there's all this AI generated art. Like, how do we know whether it's real or not? Now, art for art's sake, that's fine. But imagine somebody goes onto the web, they get a photo of me shaking hands with Putin, and it's just before an election. That could be catastrophic if that gets disseminated out. People say, well, that's just art. That's just me being creative. But that could have very bad consequences. So what we need to do is say, well, look, now, if this is AI-generated art, well, then we need to say that that is the case and put a watermark on it or something, so people can say, well, this isn't real, because it's going to get harder and harder to disseminate between what is real and what is not. It's up to people to determine what they believe is true or not false. But what is real and what is not, there is a real role for government to play. So that Vanguard unit sits at the front. We then work with industry to say, all right, what would good regulation look like around a watermark, for example? And then we can then prepare a mini white paper for government to say, well, we've already looked at this issue. You've got 1,000 issues you're looking at. Here's one that we've already taken the hard edge off. So, if it comes to market, you can put some light regulation around it. So that's one thing we're looking at. Another thing I've challenged the team to look at is, what does modern government look like? Where democracies are only 200 odd years old. They're very precious and fragile. How do we make them fit for purpose in a digital age? Because governments are very, very slow. And the lag or the latency between emerging tech and government, catching up is getting wider and wider, and that builds distrust. Look at Uber. They came to the market. It took government about 7 years to really, tidy up with reg that was, fit for purpose. We don't have that luxury with a lot of the emerging tech coming through. So how do we get a faster and more efficient cadence of government operating in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we definitely need to do. I just wanted to also ask, how do you determine the type of community and individual benefits that are, I guess, rich enough to encourage citizens to get on board? Because at the end of the day, none of this is possible without people providing even more personal data, right?
Yeah, and look, I would say that to my team all the time. What is the value proposition for any product we're rolling out? And it could be numerous, but for example, with the digital driver's license, the value proposition initially, because the only people that used it in the initial pilot were the police, but the value proposition means that I don't have to carry my leather wallet anymore, my purse anymore. So that was a convenience proposition. The value proposition for a digital ID, if you're a renter, means that I do not have to overshare so much personal information to 20 different real estate agents when I am trying to apply for a rental property. And the value proposition for the real estate agents is we're not holding on to all this personal information that if we're the subject of a cyber attack, we're going to get a brand hit like Optus did that will cause us a world of pain. So you look for the value propositions and say, look, again, this is a matter for you. It's individual choice, control. But if you want it, here is a very good salient reason why this would be a good product for you to have.
Victor, let's shift gears a bit. Corporate organisations and government agencies have stepped up their use of AI and automation technology. And of course, it makes sense because everyone wants to streamline processes and create new efficiencies at a time of global economic uncertainty. Yet organisations are clearly getting aspects of automation wrong. I mean, we saw with robo-debt, that's a prime example of what happens when automation is rolled out unchecked without the level of human oversight that's required. What, in your view, does the industry and government need to do to ensure that something like this doesn't ever happen again?
Well, fortunately, we've had the commission in relation to robo-debt, and there's a whole lot of recommendations that the government will no doubt respond to very soon. But so that gives us a good framework moving forward. And in many ways, as bad as robo-debt was, I could imagine if thank God, Mr. Shorten got out there ahead of it and use that as an example of what not to do moving forward, because it could be far, far worse consequences if we don't keep it in check.
Sure.
So having that framework in place based on the recommendations of the Royal Commission, I think is very, very good for our country moving forward. And again, if it wasn't for the robo-debt Royal Commission, I think a lot of us would have been complacent to it all.
Sure.
Just look, a bit of automation, just a bit of oversight. But it shows if you get it wrong, it can have catastrophic consequences.
Absolutely. And, chief information officers and other senior technology leaders around the country tell us that, they're really, when it comes to automation, they're looking at the low-hanging fruit. There really aren't any really large, successful use cases that they can draw from. And hopefully, as an industry, we can work towards, those big, shining examples of where automation really goes right.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not even in year one of GPT 3.5. It really came out in November last year. So we're not even in first year anniversary. Imagine where this is going to be, where it really starts hitting the enterprise level and industry starts getting their ducks aligned. And we really clean data sources up so that then you can put the enterprise Gen AI over the top. That's where I think we're going to see a lot of change in the next 2, 3, 4 years. Change.
Gen AI is a big one of this year. We're seeing a lot of activity around that. Everyone's talking about it. Yeah. Now, Victor, you've worked across every C-level persona: tech, finance, security, people, leaders. ADAPT sees competing business priorities across these groups as the main barrier to delivering successful tech projects. Now, as we see with initiatives such as the digital licence, states often appear to work in silos. Do you see this as something that helps or ultimately hinders innovation for Australia as a whole? Because we keep dropping on the Global Innovation Index.
Oh, it definitely hinders innovation. Think about magic. Why is something magical? When Houdini does a magic act, it's because you see something that you don't expect. It's just... So when government delivers a service that is on the horizontal, it's magic because people don't expect government to provide joined up services.
That's exactly right.
You're either going to get a health service, and if you're lucky, it's a good health service. Education, if you're lucky, it's a good education service. But you never see that connection between health and education and industry and blah blah blah. That's a magic act. But that's where the profound productivity really is. I would say to my team, we can stick to our swim lane and we can deliver products out of Department of Customer Service, and we're doing some pretty good stuff, impressive stuff at a global level. But they were incremental changes. The magic really happened when we were joining up with health or joining up with education or joining up with other agencies, because people don't expect that.
Do you have any advice for I guess agencies and organisations as well that are actually trying to make this work and not work in such silos as they have in the past?
Yeah, like again, if you want to just if you want to do BAU with a little bit of sugar on top, stick to your swim lane, and that's fine. But if you want to have profound, deep impact, reach across the aisle, buddy up, do something that is magical, because that's the stuff that really is nation shaping.
Yeah, for sure. Now, ADAPT data has also found that Australian organisations have been too slow to modernise. We're largely too risk averse. We're not giving digitalisation the resources that it's required. We have a limited culture of innovation. And our enterprises, I guess, are thinking too short term when it comes to this sort of stuff rather than adopting a long-term vision for the future. What's the risk for us if we don't change our thinking?
Oh, well, the risk is we will be leapfrogged. I've got no doubt about that. I remember reading a book about a year or two ago called Why Nations Fail. And they gave a classic example of Australia and Argentina being pretty much 100 years ago, neck and neck in terms of prosperity and the like. But in 100 years, Australia has continued to prosper. Argentina's gone through some challenges. Both democracies, both hugely rich in natural resources, very similar. Migrant countries, very similar, but look what happened over 100 years. If we take things for granted, then we will fall behind. Simple as that. And it won't take 100 years. World is changing. The dynamism around the world now, the pace of change means it will be, we'll see an impact or a sharp fall in decades, not centuries. So we must stay match fit and continue to push in this direction.
Absolutely, totally agree. And lastly, Victor, and thank you. It's been a great conversation so far. Can you talk about some of the key lessons you've learned about how to manage the cultural change, exec buy-in, that ultimately determines if large-scale digital projects succeed or fail, and how are you going to apply those lessons to your new roles?
Yeah, look, ultimately, Byron, it comes down to leadership. If you don't have the leader at the front that's embracing the change, prepared to take an educated and informed risk, in a safe harbour environment, and bring the community along and communicate that, then nothing's going to change. Sure. Nothing. And so ultimately, it all comes down to leadership. And for me, there are three components of leadership. One is setting the vision and the strategy. Second is to make sure it's implemented. And the third is to make sure that the vision and implementation is communicated effectively.
Absolutely.
So if you've got the VIC, then I think you're well and truly on the way. The vision piece being critical, because leaders stand on the shoulders of giants, and many, many shoulders. And therefore, they're in this very rare position where they're pretty high up in terms of the mountain. And that means they can see where the storm clouds are and see where the blue sky is. So they've got an obligation, a deep responsibility to make sure that they help craft that vision for future prosperity.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. Victor, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for chatting to me today.
You're welcome.